Gather your things and leave. This is my land." That's exactly what I said to Karen and her family when I found them having a full-blown picnic on my private lakefront lot. Her response? She immediately dialed 911, falsely claiming I threatened her with a coffee mug. Fast forward 6 months, and this same entitled woman is now paying me $850 every month just to keep her distance legally. She thought one phone call would ruin me and teach me a lesson. Turns out, it became the costliest call she's ever made. That single police report turned her from my biggest headache into my most reliable monthly income stream. And Drama Nest viewers, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. This revenge tale is one for the books. Let me take you back to the morning that flipped my entire life upside down. I'm Michael Torres, 35 years old, and I work in compliance for a financial services firm. What does that actually mean? I catch people breaking rules, and I find the sneaky legal loopholes they try to hide in contracts. Reading fine print is second nature to me. I am trained to spot violations others overlook. Little did I know, these skills were about to become weapons in an unexpected war. I had just purchased my dream lakefront property after scrimping and saving for over 3 years. But this wasn't just a house, it was my retreat, my peace, my reward for years of hard work. That Saturday morning, I was relaxing on my brand new deck, sipping coffee and going through the tedious paperwork that comes with home ownership. When you work in compliance, you can't help but read every single word, especially the fine print. That's when I came across a strange clause buried in the property documents. It had something to do with neighbor harassment. The language was oddly specific, so I immediately called my real estate agent. "Hey, what's this harassment clause about?" I asked. She laughed. "Oh, the previous owner had all sorts of issues with a neighbor. He made me include that clause in the sale. You probably won't need it, but it's there just in case." I remember thinking how detailed and peculiar it was. Would you be curious if you read something like that? Or would you shrug it off? Not long after, I noticed some movement across the street. Mrs. Cooper, the elderly woman who lives directly across from me, was standing at her window with this deeply concerned look on her face. She was shaking her head like she'd just seen a ghost. I followed her line of sight and then I saw her. This woman was striding across my lawn like she owned every inch of it. She looked like she'd walked straight out of a corporate boardroom, a blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing a business blazer, at 9 a.m. on a Saturday. Behind her was a man who looked like her husband, clearly uncomfortably, and 2 kids hauling picnic gear. They were marching straight to my waterfront like it was their personal park. Blankets, snacks, folding chairs, they were setting up for a day at my lake. I thought maybe it was an honest mistake, maybe they were confused about which property was which, but then I glanced back at Mrs. Cooper. Her face said otherwise. It was the look of someone who had seen this circus before. I walked over, still holding my coffee in a plain white mug, and politely said, "Excuse me, this is private property." The woman stopped and looked at me like I was speaking in riddles. "Oh, sweetheart," she said with a tone soaked in arrogance, "this area is part of a community easement. I've been overseeing this neighborhood for 15 years. You must be confused about the boundary lines." I couldn't believe the gall. I was standing there holding the deed to my land, and this stranger was telling me I was wrong? She introduced herself as Patricia Williams, chair of the architectural committee, like I should bow in respect. "I make the rules here," she said, flashing this smug little grin. She really believed she had control over my land. I calmly walked back to my house, grabbed my deed, property survey, and boundary maps, thinking this could be handled like grown adults. But Patricia didn't even glance at the documents. She waved her hand at them and said, "I don't care what your little papers say, I'm the one who decides what's allowed." That's when it hit me, this wasn't confusion. Patricia genuinely thought she had authority over everyone's property. You know the type, the kind of person who believes rules are for everyone else? That was her. I told them they had to leave firmly, but respectfully, and that's when she pulled a move so outrageous, I still think about it. She pulled out her phone and called 911 right in front of me. Then came the theatrics. "There's a hostile man threatening my family," she said. "He's waving a mug like a weapon. My children are scared." I looked down at my mug, still full of lukewarm coffee, stunned. Was this really happening? Her husband, Oliver looked like he wanted to disappear. Her kids looked confused, and I genuinely wondered if I'd stepped into a parallel universe. When Officer Rodriguez arrived about 10 minutes later, I finally thought this nonsense would be over. Thankfully, he seemed reasonable. He asked for documentation right away. I handed him my deed, survey, everything. Meanwhile, Patricia kept up her Oscar-worthy act of telling him I was yelling, threatening her, and wielding my coffee cup like a sword. Officer Rodriguez glanced at my mug, then back at Patricia, and I swear I saw him fighting not to roll his eyes. After looking through my documents, he turned to her and said plainly, "Ma'am, this man is within his rights. You are trespassing on his private property, but here's the part that saved me in ways I didn't yet understand." Officer Rodriguez filed a very thorough report. "Here's your case number," he told me, handing over a card. "Keep this safe. This documents her trespassing and a false police report. If it ever goes to court, you'll need this." At the time, I figured it was just standard procedure. I didn't realize then that Officer Rodriguez had just handed me the foundation of my legal defense. Patricia stormed off with her family, glaring at me like I'd ruined her life. Little did she know it was about to get a whole lot worse for her. "You don't know who you're dealing with. I run everything around here." That's what Patricia said as she stormed off, clutching that police report like it was a trophy. And in that moment, one thought echoed in my head. What if that very report becomes the key to taking her entire kingdom down? Let me ask you something, Anadrama Nest viewers. Have you ever been bullied by someone with too much power? You'd think an incident like that with a police involved might have made Patricia take a step back, maybe even reflect. Wrong. So wrong. Within 2 days, I received a formal-looking envelope from the HOA with Patricia's signature stamped at the bottom. It was an official complaint loaded with wild accusations and claims that I was aggressive, antisocial, a danger to the neighborhood, and refusing to honor community norms. I sat at my kitchen table reading this nonsense, each sentence more twisted than the last. Almost everything she wrote was either flat-out false or a blatant distortion of reality. But here's what I hadn't fully grasped yet. Patricia wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She'd been the chairwoman of the architectural committee for over 15 years. She was the HOA's enforcer. And now she had me locked in her crosshairs. Over the next few days, I began to notice her movements. I work remotely, so I had front row seats as Patricia went door to door throughout the neighborhood, clipboard in hand, stopping at each home for long, strategic chats. Later, I'd find out exactly what she was telling my neighbors, and it was pure manipulation. "Michael seems unstably broken bar. My children are too scared to play outside the broken bar. He's one of those people who like to sue HOA's a broken bar. If we don't stick together, our property values will plummet." Classic playbook. Stir up fear, then paint yourself as the solution. And it worked, at least on some of them. After all, no one wants to make waves when the person causing the ripples is the same one who signs off on permits and violations. So what would you do if someone like that was spreading lies about you? The next home meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening, and walking into the community center felt like I was entering enemy territory. Patricia had spent days preparing for this like it was a courtroom showdown, and she'd packed the place. Residents who hadn't attended a single home meeting in years suddenly showed up in full force. Patricia had turned this routine meeting into a full-blown public shaming with me as the target. When she stood to speak, she launched into a performance that would have put Broadway stars to shame. This man violently confronted my innocent family while we were enjoying the shared lakefront. The police were involved. My children are still traumatized. Her voice trembled. Her hands gestured wildly as if she was reliving a horror movie. She spoke of the terrifying coffee mug I supposedly wielded like a weapon. The room responded just how she wanted. Gasps, whispers, judgmental stares aimed directly at me. For a split second, I actually questioned whether I remembered things correctly. But that's where working in compliance has its advantages. I keep records. I stay calm when others spin narratives. And I had come prepared. When it was my turn, I stood, opened my folder, and read directly from the police report. "According to Officer Rodriguez," I said, reading word for word, "I was exercising my rights as the property owner." Patricia Williams was found to be trespassing on private land. Suddenly, the air shifted. The crowd fell silent. No more gasps, just confused glances and frowns of uncertainty. And then I flipped the script. See, the thing about compliance work is, you notice patterns. And I had spent the last week combing through every HOA policy, bylaw, and permit on file. Turns out, Patricia had a few skeletons of her own. And unlike me, she couldn't hide behind paperwork. I calmly presented printed photos, her unauthorized deck expansion, landscaping that blocked a neighbor's access path, and numerous parking violations all overlooked without consequence. I was under the impression the HOA enforced rules equally, I said, looking straight at her. Or do the rules change depending on who's holding the clipboard? Patricia's expression went from smug to stunned to furious. Board members shifted in their seats. Neighbors whispered, trading notes. You could see the power dynamic beginning to crack. Patricia tried to minimize her offenses, calling them minor oversights and trying to shift the attention back to me with vague accusations about behavioral concerns. But it was too late. The mood had shifted. People were starting to see HOA maybe for the first time, not as a protector of the community, but as someone who bent the rules to suit her ego. The meeting officially ended, but Patricia wasn't ready to give up her grip. She stayed behind, weaving through the room like a campaigner reminding people of favors, whispering in ears. Remember who fast-tracked your pool permit? Remember how I helped overlook your fence height violation? She was using every ounce of social capital she had left. As people began to leave, an older woman approached me with a quiet smile, one of those people who'd clearly seen Patricia's games before. Son, she said knowingly, a broken bar. She leaned in quietly and said, I'm Mrs. Cooper. I've served as treasurer for the HOA for the past 10 years and I've seen Patricia's creative bookkeeping. The last homeowner tried to challenge her but gave up and left. You thought a broken bar? You seem different. Maybe you're finally the one with the guts and the skill set to stop her. Then, without another word, she slipped a manila folder into my hand and walked away. I waited until I got home to open it. When I did, my jaw literally dropped. Inside were financial statements, spreadsheets, payment logs, and expense records, layer after layer of questionable transactions. Patterns began to emerge, and they were seriously disturbing. What if Patricia's financial misconduct was way more serious than anyone had guessed? And drama-nest viewers, I've got to ask, have you ever suspected shady behavior in your neighborhood? Because the moment that home meeting ended, the harassment campaign started. And I don't mean days later, I mean immediately. Like Patricia had a pre-written playbook labeled harassment tactics. The very next morning, I woke up to a violation notice taped right to my front door. The reason? Lawn maintenance below approved standards. So I went outside, coffee in hand, and inspected my own lawn. Then I walked up and down the block. Every single yard, including Manila, looked identical. Same grass height, same edging, same overall condition. It was laughable. Clearly, this was never about grass. It was about intimidation. That afternoon, I received a second violation. This time, excessive noise during community quiet hours. And guess what caused it? Typing on my laptop while working from home. Yes, typing. Apparently, my keystrokes had now become a threat to public peace. Each day brought a fresh, absurd violation, each one requiring written replies, supporting documents, and increasingly expensive fees. It wasn't just annoying, it was calculated. She cited me for an unauthorized structure because I had a small decorative garden gnome on my front porch. Then I was slapped with a parking violation because my car was allegedly 6 inches over some imaginary line that shifted based on Patricia's mood. Another citation claimed I'd disturbed the peace by having a business call at 2 p.m. on a weekday. This wasn't a random pattern. It was psychological warfare, a paper-cut bureaucracy designed to exhaust me. She wanted to drown me in red tape until I gave up and sold my dream home, just like the guy before me. By the third week, I was seriously starting to burn out. I was buried under documents, citations, letters, and legal nonsense. One night around 3 a.m., I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by piles of paper, calculating just how much time and money each of these bogus violations was costing me: direct expenses, wasted hours, lost productivity. And then it clicked. Patricia was going for death by 1,000 cuts. Her goal was to wear me down so I'd surrender, pack up, and walk away. But she had made a massive mistake. She was playing games with someone who not only knew the system but mastered it. That's the thing about working in compliance. You learn to study every line of a policy, every loophole in a rulebook, and more importantly, you learn how to use those rules against people who think they're untouchable. So, it was time to stop playing defensive and start going on the attack. I took the manila folder Mrs. Cooper had given me and began combing through the HOA financials the same way I conduct high-level investigations in my professional role. Line by line, document by document, what I uncovered, it was both jaw-dropping and infuriating. Mrs. Cooper had quietly handed me everything I needed. She later explained, "As treasurer, I'm legally required to provide financial records to any homeowner who requests them. I've been waiting years for someone bold enough to actually look." Page after page revealed years' worth of community expenses. But then I saw something strange: irregular monthly payments made out to a company called Lakeside Maintenance Services. The amounts weren't small. We're talking thousands of dollars every month, all allegedly for landscaping, beautification, and neighborhood improvement projects. So, I did what anyone in my line of work would do. I opened my laptop, launched a corporate record search, and looked up the company owner. Guess who it was? Patricia Williams. She'd been funneling HOA funds into a company she owned for over 3 years, paying herself to handle contracts she also signed off on. It was the definition of a conflict of interest and likely criminal. But it didn't stop at self-dealing and embezzlement. As I kept digging through the documents Mrs. Cooper had slipped me, I found email exchanges between Patricia and the current HOA treasurer that were absolutely damning. One message, in particular, still boils my blood. Here it is. She had the audacity to defend the entire setup. Community beautification includes maintaining model homes that boost the overall value of everyone's property. Model homes. She was literally justifying using home money on her own house by calling it a model property, claiming it raised everyone else's property value. Over a span of 3 years, Patricia had funneled a staggering $47,000 in HOA funds directly into her personal landscaping and home upgrades, all while genuine community needs were brushed aside due to so-called budget limitations. At 2 a.m., surrounded by printouts of emails, bank records, and contractor bills, I began to see the bigger, darker picture of just how deep this corruption ran. That's when I remembered something Mrs. Cooper said in our first conversation. The previous homeowner had uncovered the same financial inconsistencies but couldn't prove malicious intent. Patricia had bullied him into submission. That's exactly why he'd insisted on that unusual harassment clause in the property sale agreement. He once told me, "Maybe the next owner will be braver and smarter than I was." Suddenly, the clause made perfect legal sense. It wasn't weird, it was a legal shield left behind by someone who'd already fought this war and lost. Turns out, he had faced Patricia's wrath just like I was. Only difference, he cracked under the pressure. But before leaving, he made sure the next homeowner had a fighting chance. That clause was his final act of resistance. Mrs. Cooper filled in the painful backstory. The previous owner was a veteran, someone who had poured his entire disability settlement into purchasing that peaceful lakefront property as a retirement refuge. When he started asking questions about Patricia's handling of HOA finances, she unleashed her full arsenal of frivolous citations, legal threats, public shaming, and intentional isolation. He suffered from PTSD, and after 6 months of unrelenting harassment, he had a full-blown mental health crisis. Eventually, he was forced to sell his home at a huge loss just to protect his sanity and leave the nightmare behind. That's when he added the harassment clause to ensure that whoever came after him would have legal grounds to fight back. As I sorted through nearly 90 pages of damning evidence, I couldn't stop thinking about the neighbors who had been faithfully paying their dues while Patricia lined her pockets. There was the elderly couple told there wasn't enough money for sidewalk repairs. Meanwhile, Patricia had a new deck installed, funded by their contributions. Or the young family whose request for safe playground equipment was not in the budget, yet Patricia's fancy garden landscaping was approved in days. Or the single mom fined for leaving her kids' toys in the yard while Patricia's violations were magically overlooked. The real smoking gun came when I found an email chain that was so blatant, I had to read it twice. Patricia wrote to the treasurer, "Tom, Stop questioning every bill that comes through. We've already gone over this. Model properties benefit everyone. Process the payments. That's your job. Translation: don't dig too deep or you'll get the same treatment as everyone else who stands in my way. And Tom's reply sealed it. Understood, Patricia. I'll approve them without review. As discussed, this wasn't just mismanagement. This was full-blown organized financial fraud with accomplices, cover-ups, and intimidation. Patricia wasn't just misusing HOA funds. She was draining the community of its dignity, its unity, its future. But here's the twist. What happens when a manipulative bully realizes she's finally been caught red-handed? And a drama nest wants to know, ever seen someone so guilty they try to silence the truth before it's even spoken? I scheduled an emergency home meeting with one agenda item: financial transparency and accountability. The neighborhood was buzzing with rumors all week. When Thursday evening rolled around, the community center was packed to the brim. Standing room only, people lining the walls. Faces I'd never seen at home meetings before were there, notebooks in hand, jaws set. You could feel the electricity in the air. This wasn't just curiosity. This was righteous anger waiting for answers. But Patricia wasn't about to go down without a fight. She came armed with her own counterattack, and she wasted no time. Standing confidently at the podium, she started the meeting with a speech straight out of a political thriller. Before we begin, I want this community to know that certain individuals have been launching personal attacks against our whole leadership, she declared, in a tone so dramatic it felt like a courtroom drama. She accused me without saying my name of harassment, defamation, even potential criminal behavior. According to her, this wasn't about accountability. This was a character assault led by a disgruntled homeowner unwilling to follow established community standards. And then came her real threat. We are considering legal action, she warned, looking directly at me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. A broken bar is currently being considered against individuals who continue these malicious activities. You had to admire the strategy even if it was twisted and deeply manipulative. Patricia was reframing my investigation into HOA financial corruption as a personal vendetta. She painted herself as the victim, all before I could even show a single receipt. It was psychological warfare at its finest, ruthless, chilling, and deliberately crafted to silence not just me but anyone who might believe the evidence I was about to lay bare. But what Patricia didn't know a broken bar is that 3 years working in corporate compliance had trained me exactly for moments like this. I didn't get emotional. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even mention her name more than once. I let the evidence speak for itself. A cold, factual, and damning. I stood before that packed community center and calmly said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not here to accuse anyone. I'm here to share verifiable public records of bank statements, contractor invoices, and documented email exchanges. You have the right to see how your community funds were used, and you can decide what that means for our shared future." I clicked through my visual presentation, the charts, before and after photos of Patricia's personal property upgrades, side-by-side comparisons of her spending versus denied community requests, and emails that revealed an unmistakable patterns of insider dealings. Gasps, audible whispers, mouths open in stunned disbelief. Mrs. Cooper rose from her chair, her voice trembling with rage held in for years, and said, "So that's why my repair requests always stayed under review. A broken bar while her backyard fountain got approved in 2 days flat." Others began to speak up too. The father whose playground proposal was denied, the elderly woman whose cracked sidewalk was not a priority, the disabled veteran whose ramp design was rejected for violating aesthetic standards. One by one, residents connected the dots and realized they'd been scammed. And Patricia knew it. But instead of defending herself with facts or explanations, she completely lost control. She stood up, her finger shaking as she pointed at me and screamed, "This is a personal attack. Michael is mentally unstable. Look how obsessed he is printing out emails, building conspiracy theories. I will sue anyone who repeats these lies." It was wild, a meltdown in real time. Patricia was threatening to sue anyone who believed documented evidence. It was psychological terrorism, pure and simple, designed to intimidate everyone in the room into ignoring the facts they'd just seen with their own eyes. And sadly, for some, it worked. Fear is a powerful tool, and Patricia had held the reins of power for over 15 years, approving permits, enforcing violations, and making budget decisions that directly affected everyone's lives. Several board members, clearly shaken by her threats, voted to delay any disciplinary action pending legal review, which was exactly what Patricia wanted. She strutted out of that room with a smug smile, while I felt like I just watched justice get sucker punched and left for dead. But Patricia made one fatal mistake. Instead of staying quiet and letting the dust settle, she went on the offensive via doubling down on her power plays. She started a whisper campaign to secure loyalty from residents she'd helped in the past. She reminded them of permits she'd fast-tracked, violations she'd ignored, future projects she could either approve via or block. "Remember who helped you build that deck in 2 weeks?" she whispered to one neighbor. "Remember who looked the other way when your hedges crossed the property line?" She hinted to another. It was like a protection racket disguised as community management. And while she tried to buy loyalty, she went after me harder than ever. Suddenly, my mailbox was too close to the sidewalk, my outdoor lighting was too bright, my trash bins were placed wrong, even my doormat was cited as a violation. Every day brought a new petty complaint, each with written warnings, paperwork, and escalating fines. She was trying to wear me down, financially, mentally, socially. Then came the rumor mill. "He's a lawsuit magnate," she'd whisper. "I heard he sued his last HOA and bankrupted them. He just moves in, files lawsuits, and leaves neighborhoods in ruins." Completely false, but believable enough to raise eyebrows and plant seeds of doubt. She was poisoning the well, turning neighbors against me, while building her own narrative as the misunderstood leader being unfairly attacked. But what she didn't count in a broken bar was how determined I had become to end the corruption, and not just for me, but for every person who'd ever been silenced, ignored, or exploited. And that's when the real battle began. A broken bar obsession she claimed I had. But nothing prepared me for the legal threat that arrived next. The moment I opened that cease and desist letter, my hands went cold. It ordered me to stop making any and all defamatory statements about Patricia Williams and the HOA's financial practices, or face a full-blown lawsuit demanding $200,000 in damages for ruining her reputation, emotional distress, and interfering with her business dealings. $200,000. I sat there staring at this letter, written by someone who clearly knew how to terrify people with legalese. My mind raced to thinking about what I had in my bank account, the mortgage I was still paying off, and wondering whether I had just waged a war one was never equipped to win. Patricia had more money, more connections, and 15 years of local influence to call on, and for the first time since everything began, I felt real fear. I started doubting myself and every step I had taken. But as I sat with that cease and desist letter in one hand and the police report from our first run-in in the other, a realization hit me that flipped the script entirely. What if the exact evidence Patricia wanted to bury was the very thing that could bring her down? And a drama nest is all about questions like that. What would you do if someone tried to sue you into silence just for telling the truth? 3 days later, a process server showed up at my front door with official court documents in hand. Patricia wasn't bluffing. She had gone through with a massive defamation lawsuit. She was demanding $200,000 for alleged malicious damage to her reputation, emotional suffering, and interference with her professional ties. The legal packet was thick, intimidating, and drafted with the precision of someone who knew how to bury the truth beneath layers of accusations. Her lawyer had created an entire fictional story casting me as some obsessed newcomer with a vendetta against a noble community servant who had dedicated 15 years of her life to selfless leadership. Reading it made me feel like the villain. I started questioning if I'd really gone too far. The meeting with my attorney only made things worse. Yes, he told me, truth is a complete defense in defamation cases. But proving the truth in court, that's a whole different battle. The discovery process alone could bleed you dry of $50,000 or more. And Patricia looks financially prepared for a long fight. She might not win the case, but she can destroy you with legal costs. I left his office feeling crushed. My savings couldn't withstand this. My mental health definitely couldn't. That night, I barely slept. I kept picturing Patricia walking out of the home meeting as smug and untouchable. Now I finally understood why. At 3 a.m., pacing the living room of what was supposed to be my dream home, I seriously thought about packing up, selling the house, and vanishing. Move somewhere far away, start over, somewhere with no Patricia, no HOA drama, no war. Fighting someone like her, someone ruthless, connected, and well-funded, it's soul-crushing. And I wasn't sure if I had the strength to keep going. That's when my phone rang. Mrs. Cooper was on the other end, and the moment she spoke, I knew something was wrong. Her voice was tight, worried. "Michael," she said, "word of the lawsuits spreading around the neighborhood, and I need you to hear something very important." She told me about the man who lived here before me, how he also tried to stand up to Patricia and how she used the same dirty tactics to break him down. She threatened him, just like you, legal pressure, community smear campaigns, psychological warfare, she said. He finally gave up and left, and once he was gone, Patricia took over his beautiful garden and claimed the private dock access for her own family. That's how she wins. She makes people quit. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't seen clearly until then. This fight a broken bar. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every future homeowner she might victimize. If I walked away, I wasn't just giving up, I was helping her repeat the same pattern. I'd be one more person added to her list of wins through intimidation. I asked Mrs. Cooper, what exactly happened to the man before me? Why did he put that harassment clause in the deed? What really drove him out? She told me a story that made my blood boil. The previous owner was a military veteran who had put every penny of his disability settlement into buying this lakefront home. It was supposed to be his retreat, a place to heal from PTSD and enjoy peace after years of service. But when he uncovered Patricia's financial misconduct and dared to speak out, she unleashed the same weapons she was now using on me: frivolous violation letters, legal threats, constant stress, isolation. She turned the entire community against him, using fear like a scalpel. He was already struggling mentally, and Patricia knew it. She used every tool in her arsenal to break him. And it worked. But not this time, not if I had anything to do with it. Patricia's relentless psychological warfare had finally pushed the previous owner to his breaking point. After enduring 6 grueling months of targeted torment, he suffered a complete nervous breakdown and sold the house for far less than it was worth, just to escape the madness and reclaim his peace of mind. That's when he insisted on including the harassment clause in the sales agreement, a final, desperate stand against the abuse he'd endured. Mrs. Cooper told me he had said, maybe the next owner will be wiser, braver, maybe they'll be the one to stop her once and for all. That stuck with me. I suddenly realized I wasn't just standing up for myself anymore, I was continuing a fight that began long before I got here. This was for him, for Mrs. Cooper, and for every person Patricia might try to crush in the future. The next morning, I marched back into my attorney's office with a fresh fire in my chest. We pulled out every scrap of documentation from my property purchase, combing through it with laser focus to prepare for the legal battle that could determine the rest of my life. As my lawyer meticulously sorted the paperwork into organized piles, I noticed something familiar in the contract wording that sent a jolt through me. "Hold on," I said, flipping open the full agreement. This clause about harassment. I remember my realtor mentioning something about the previous owner dealing with a hostile neighbor. Let me find it, a broken bar. We dug through the fine print until we found the clause, tucked deep within the boilerplate language. And there it was, clear as day. In the event of documented neighbor harassment, trespassing, or repeated interference with enjoyment of property, the buyer may compel the offending party to maintain a distance of no less than 500 feet from all property boundaries, or compensate the buyer with monthly payments of $850 until the offending behavior permanently ceases. My attorney stared at the clause in silence, reading it over and over again before finally saying, "This is extremely rare language, a broken bar but completely enforceable under state property law." He glanced up at me. "With your police report and the clear pattern of harassment, you've got a rock-solid case. She won't be able to worm her way out of this." Just like that, the entire narrative flipped. Instead of scrambling to defend myself against a $200,000 defamation suit and risking everything I owned, I now held a powerful legal weapon, a one Patricia couldn't defend against. That same day, we filed a counterclaim. We invoked the harassment clause and demanded that Patricia either comply with the 500-foot boundary or begin paying me $850 every month until her behavior stopped. But here's the kicker. Because of how close Patricia lived to key parts of the neighborhood, that distance requirement would make her day-to-day life completely unmanageable. Her home was only about 200 feet from the lake, meaning the restriction would bar her from nearly every community feature she regularly used and tightly controlled. Her kids wouldn't be able to reach the bus stop or their friends' homes. She couldn't walk her dog on the trails, attend social events, or even use the grocery route she usually took without violating the order. The geography of the neighborhood gave me an undeniable legal advantage. That evening, Mrs. Cooper called again. This time, her voice carried a smile I hadn't heard in weeks. Patricia had received the counterclaim and her high-powered lawyer had delivered some brutally honest news during their emergency meeting. "This clause creates automatic liability," he reportedly told her. "No matter how your defamation case plays out, the harassment clause stands." The documentation supports his claims, and the financial consequences could be catastrophic. But Patricia's reaction? Classic narcissist meltdown. She screamed, "I don't care what it costs or how long it takes to destroy him." She was so obsessed with control, with winning, that she couldn't see she was already losing everything. And here's the twist, that harassment clause wasn't just about money or physical space. It was poetic justice. It was karma. If you believe that justice always finds its way, type karma in the comments. The clause's brilliance revealed itself in full force when Patricia's legal team explained just how thoroughly it dismantled her lifestyle. The 500-foot restriction wasn't some minor inconvenience, it completely shattered her daily routine. She couldn't access the community pool, where her kids took swimming lessons 3 times a week. She was banned from the tennis courts where she played every Tuesday and Thursday. The walking trails where she power walked and traded gossip with her clique were off limits too. Even her kids couldn't reach the playground or the bus stop. And visiting friends? Out of the question. She couldn't even use her usual route to get to the main road without taking a ridiculous 2-mile detour through heavy traffic every single time she left her house. In essence, Patricia had become a prisoner in the very home she once ruled over, a prisoner of her own making. After 15 years of abusing authority, the weight of her own documented misconduct had finally closed in on her. There was no escaping the reality anymore. The police reports, the violation notices, the threatening emails, the testimonies from witnesses, it was all there, laid out in black and white. A legal trap of her own design that now left her cornered. The irony was thick, and it couldn't have been more poetic. But Patricia wasn't one to go down without a final, desperate spectacle. She tried to claw her way back into favor with the neighborhood by launching a last-minute, door-to-door campaign, one filled with manipulative fear tactics and half-truths. She painted herself as the helpless victim of so-called legal bullying, claiming I was using obscure legal language to control the entire neighborhood. "He's twisting legal loopholes to take over everything," she told anyone who would listen, her voice shaky and filled with forced desperation. "If he can do this to me, someone who's given 15 years of service to this community, he can do it to anyone. Today it's me. Tomorrow it could be your family." She tried hard to make it look like I was the villain, a cold legal bully weaponizing technicalities to terrorize the innocent and ruin what she called the community spirit. For a brief moment, I was worried her fearmongering might actually work. After all, Patricia had spent years building up favors, alliances, and influence. But then something truly unforgettable happened, something that completely shifted the entire atmosphere. Mrs. Cooper, the soft-spoken 70-year-old treasurer who had served on the board for a decade, finally stood up during what would be Patricia's last public home meeting. Her hands trembled slightly, not from age, but from emotion. And when she began to speak, the entire room fell into stunned silence. Her words carried a gravity that demanded everyone's attention. "I've been the treasurer for 10 years, she began, "and I stayed quiet while Patricia twisted our finances and bullied our neighbors. One of them, a veteran suffering from PTSD, ended up selling his home at a loss after enduring her harassment. I can't stay silent anymore. Then Mrs. Cooper turned her gaze directly at Oliver A., Patricia's husband, and asked the question that broke through the last of Patricia's armor. "Olivera Brokenbar, you know it's all true, don't you? The shady finances, the bullying, the abuse of power, you've watched it happen for years. When will you stop enabling this? How long will you let her tear this community apart?" Oliver looked as if he'd aged 10 years in that moment, like the burden of guilt he'd been carrying had finally become too heavy. He slowly nodded, the entire room watching as Patricia's jaw dropped in disbelief. Even her most loyal supporter had finally reached his breaking point. That moment shattered everything she thought was unshakable. Patricia's reign wasn't just cracking, it was collapsing. Later that night, Oliver had a long overdue confrontation with her. Mrs. Cooper overheard the entire thing from her home next door, the yelling, the crying, and finally, the truth. "I've known something was wrong for months," Oliver reportedly told her. "Those fancy landscaping projects that only helped our yard, the sudden contracts that conveniently went to your company, the way you talk about our neighbors like they're beneath you. I kept quiet because I loved you and wanted to be supportive, but I can't do it anymore. I won't watch you ruin more lives and pretend it's all for the good of the community." He gave her an ultimatum: settle the lawsuit and apologize to the people she'd hurt, or he would file for divorce and take the kids away from the toxic environment she'd created. For the first time in this entire ordeal, Patricia was facing real consequences, and not from a legal document or a judge, but from the one person she couldn't manipulate, her husband. As all of this unfolded, her attorney was also hitting her with more devastating news. The defamation lawsuit she filed against me was falling apart fast, thanks to all the hard documentation I had, the harassment, the shady finances, the threats. It was clear her case had no real legs to stand on. Even worse for her, the harassment clause from the original purchase agreement, the one her lawyer had tried to dismiss at first day, was rock solid. And more evidence supporting my side was piling up by the day. Legal fees were piling up at a terrifying rate, and Patricia knew deep down that there was no victory in sight. But what truly shook her to the core was what came next. The district attorney's office had begun asking hard questions about the shady financial dealings within the HOA. Someone had tipped them off anonymously. Suddenly, Patricia wasn't just dealing with a civil case, criminal charges for embezzlement and fraud were now on the table. That meant more than just losing money. We were talking possible jail time, a criminal record, and complete destruction of the reputation she'd so carefully built. Everything, her status, her wealth, her family, now teetered on the edge of collapse. And it had all started with her trying to bully one new neighbor, blindly thinking she was untouchable after 15 years of unchecked power. That arrogance was now her undoing. The negotiation meeting was something straight out of a courtroom drama. Patricia sat across the table from me, flanked by her lawyer, looking utterly defeated. I was offering terms that were, frankly, generous, especially considering how much damage she'd caused and how strong my case had become. The deal? Drop the bogus defamation lawsuit immediately. Agree to pay me $850 a month for 5 years, a total of $51,000. Publish a public apology to the entire community, taking full responsibility for financial misconduct and her abuse of authority. And finally, promise to never interfere with me or any other resident ever again. That $850 wasn't random. It was carefully calculated to cover every cent of my legal expenses, the emotional distress she'd caused, and to serve as a monthly reminder of what happens when you abuse power. Patricia's hands trembled as she signed the settlement. She glared at me with a twisted mixture of hate and humiliation. Then, through clenched teeth, she muttered, "I hope you're happy. You've ruined my life." I looked her dead in the eye and answered, "I'm happy to have protected mine and made sure you never ruin anyone else's again." Oliver, her husband, quietly added from the corner, "Thank you for giving us a way out of this nightmare, but maybe this victory is just the start of something bigger." Anna Drama Nest wants to hear what you think. Are monthly revenge payments the perfect form of justice? Epilogue, Legacy and Transformation. 6 months later, my lakefront property looks like a dream. And the funny part, every upgrade has been paid for with Patricia's money. Her $850 checks funded a full dock renovation, top-tier security cameras, and landscaping so gorgeous it looks like it belongs in a resort brochure. Every morning, When I sip my coffee out on that deck, I think about the irony at the same woman who tried to destroy my peace now bankrolls it. And let me tell you, that coffee tastes sweeter knowing exactly who's paying for it. But the changes didn't stop at my doorstep. Our entire community went through a transformation. We cleaned house and elected a fresh HOA board that values transparency over tyranny. Mrs. Cooper is now president, and her first move was brilliant: financial reform. Now, any HOA expenditure over $500 requires 3 board member signatures and full community notification. Contractor relationships must be openly disclosed. Monthly financials are posted online for everyone to view. Patricia made corruption look easy. Mrs. Cooper made it impossible. As for Patricia herself, she's vanished from public view. No more community events, no home meetings, just hurried walks to her car with sunglasses on and her head low. The rare times I run into her, she avoids me like I'm the IRS with a flashlight. Oliver, though, he's like a whole new man, freed from the shadow of her manipulation. He's actually a broken bar happy. I hear he's volunteering in the new community garden and chatting with neighbors he used to ignore. It's nice to see. Now here's what might be the most satisfying twist of all. AI took Patricia's payments and started the Property Rights Legal Aid Fund. With her money, we've already helped other homeowners fight back against HOA abuse and neighbor harassment. In just the first year, we've resolved 3 big cases: a disabled veteran harassed over his service dog, an elderly couple buried in bogus violation notices, a young family whose building permit was held hostage by a power-tripping board member. Every month, that $850 helps protect people like them and the same kind of folks Patricia used to bully. There's something deliciously poetic about that. We've now helped 12 families, saved them thousands in legal fees, and showed them that when you understand your rights and refuse to be intimidated, bullies can be beaten hard. Just last month, I had a surprise visitor. The veteran who originally created that harassment clause stopped by to see how things had turned out. He looked out at my deck, smiled, and said, "So broken bar, you did what I never could." That clause was my gift to whoever came next. And you made it count. We sat there on the dock for over an hour, sharing stories about HOA tyrants and why standing up to abuse of power matters. I've since framed the police report Patricia filed against me. It hangs in my home office, right next to my compliance certificate and a printout of the notification of her very first payment. That wall reminds me daily, sometimes your enemy gives you exactly what you need to defeat them. And just yesterday, I got an email that made me laugh out loud and immediately forwarded to our legal aid director, Mr. Torres. It read, "Our HOA president claims he owns the community dock and is charging illegal boat access fees. Some residents are afraid to speak up. Can you help?" My reply was short and sweet: "We'll be in touch very soon." Retirement can wait. A justice, apparently, is a full-time job, a broken bar with outstanding benefits. So here's the lesson: don't let bullies win. Document everything. Know your rights. And remember, at the best revenge a broken bar is living well, on their dime. If this story fired you up, hit that like button and tell us in the comments, say, have you ever had to deal with a neighborhood Karen? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next wild ride here on Anna Drama Nest, where justice is always served cold. Classic Anna. Like, share, and click on the next video, a broken bar, if you dare.